We're going to shoot a little video here on a Baron. This is a Beechcraft 95 B55, also known as a B55 Baron. This is November 286 Delta, serial number TC2182. It's a 1979 model. I actually owned this plane a few years ago. Flew it about 60 or 70 hours. Did some improvement to it. Sold it to a gentleman down in Tennessee. He decided to buy an MU2, so I bought the Baron back. He did some great improvements. One thing he did is this beautiful paint job by Southern Eagle Aviation in Georgia. This is probably one of the prettiest paint jobs I've seen on a B55 Baron. The combination of the black, gray, white, the black, gray, white, and red with the big B on the tail just really makes it look bigger than a B55 for some reason. But they did a beautiful job painting it. No runs, very little dirt in the paint anywhere. Just really a clean job. Very nice. They did a nice job of doing the bonding the boots back on with the static discharge paint. Just did a really nice job. It's just a very clean paint job. He also did the, I believe they're called G&D inserts on the windows. Those are inserts on the inside that really help with the sun, especially in the summer. Helps keep the cabin cool. Not real cheap, but it sure is a nice job. Very professionally installed. The gentleman that installs them does good work. But again, the paint's just really nice. It's a neat scheme. A little different than most Barons. I think that tail scheme might be from 2009. Maybe 2010 when Beechcraft, that year, the factory scheme. But this one here has about 4,400 hours on it. Has some nice modifications, the big one being what's called the Colemill President II conversion. And what that is, these originally came with 260 horsepower IO 470 fuel-injected engines. Great engines. The airframe's fine with those engines. It performs very well with the 470s. However, these 550s add probably closer to 50 or 60 horsepower side. They're 300 horsepower engines, but they're guaranteed for 300 horsepower. They'll make at least that, probably closer to 310. So you get about 300 plus horsepower on the side instead of 260. The big advantage is in the single engine performance. The airplane will, single engine service ceilings over 14,000 feet, which is an incredible amount of service ceiling for a normally aspirated engine. Also, the on a normal day, 60-degree day at gross, it'll initially climb at about 2,000 foot a minute, up to about 5,000 feet, and then you're down to about 1,700 foot a minute, and at 10,000 it'll still hold 1,100 foot a minute at 130 knots indicated. So very, very good performance. Really hard to beat these engines. Another nice feature of these engines, they're belt driven off the back of the engine instead of gear driven off the front. I know that don't sound like a big deal, but if you ever had to replace a gear-driven alternator or have one fail catastrophically, you'll know what I'm talking about there. Easy engine to work on, easy to change oil on, pretty reliable. This one was factory remans. I think the engines have about 1,150 hours on them. Running very strong, runs great, lean of peak, very cool cylinder head temperatures. Matter of fact, I have a hard time keeping them warm. They'll be in the the low ones will be in the 250, 260 range, and the highest cylinder in cruise will be 290, 300. Never see over 375 on a hot day takeoff, and never over 375. And a lot of times I even climb with the cowl flaps closed, especially in the winter, not needed. So great airframe. Again, they just did a beautiful job on the paint. I'm not sure if the shop's in business anymore. I'll have to check. Like a lot of aviation companies, I think they might have suffered the fate of having to close, but they just did such a nice job painting it. This paint job now is about 2 years old. It's got a couple hundred hours on it, but just holding up really well. Just did a really nice job. Some in the later, I guess you would call this a later B55. I don't know if you can see this. One of the features, they have nice, the later ones have fuel gauges in the wing here. And that's nice because you can see right off the bat If you have between 40 and 60 gallons in the tank, you have less than 40 anyway just by looking. So you don't have to go in the cockpit to see what you have initially. Of course, you always want to check. Another nice thing like about the B55, they're not known. None of them are known ice certified, except unless you install TKS later, which is wonderful. But TKS is about $60,000. A lot of them came with boots though, and these boots do a great job. I've never had a problem with ice. I've had a couple inches on a bear, no problem. Knock it off, keep going. The other feature I like is it has isopropyl alcohol propellers, which means this little tube right here sprays isopropyl out onto this boot, and this boot has vanes in it that brings the isopropyl out to the end of the blade and keeps the ice off. What's nice about this is it's dirt simple. It's at a 3-gallon reservoir inside the baggage compartment over here, and you just turn on a pump. It'll give you about an hour and a half to 2 hours of continuous de-icing on the props, and it keeps them clean. Dirt simple. There's nothing to break other than the pump. So unless you have a pump failure, you just never have a problem with it. Electric props are great. They work well. They have the same system. They have a boot with electric in them, electric heating elements instead of alcohol. The problem with electric is the pads can go bad, and they're expensive to replace. They also have brushes on the inside here to pass the current from this side of the engine to the prop. They can go bad. Wire connections go bad. It's just, they're a lot of work. They work just as good, if not better, the electric ones. The problem is they're problematic. You also have an alcohol spray bar on the pilot side. That sprays up onto the windshield and does a good job of keeping the windshield clear. You need to apply the alcohol before you get into until you get into the ice. It really helps to coat it first. It's more of an anti-ice than a de-ice, but it does a good job. It does what it needs to do. And again, I prefer the alcohol, so you don't have this in a regular bearing. You have a plate up here, and it's only in the center of the windshield. It tends to get older. It gets opaque, and it starts to crack. Again, they're expensive. They're $3,000 or $4,000 just for the pad. So I prefer the alcohol. It's just me. Your mileage may differ. There's opinions on this stuff. But love the alcohol props, love the boots, love the Colemill 300 horsepower engines. I've had 4 of these B55s, and every one of them's been a Colemill. The 520 is also good too. There's a gentleman I sold one to in California who has a beautiful Colemill 520, which really is about the same performance as the 550. It doesn't do quite as well maybe up at high altitude, but we're talking very minor differences. The 79 model also, you gain, and I think it's 74 and after, you gain a few nice things. One is the gauges that we talked about in the wing. That's kind of nice, being able to check your fuel right off the bat. You also get, and I know this sounds a bit picky, but you get these latches for the baggage that are much better. Just push them, they open up, and then there's a safety latch that you push in here to release the baggage compartment. And then the baggage opens. I know that sounds stupid, but those are just really nice. High quality latches. They latch nicely. Then the interior front baggage isn't huge, but when we go to Florida, family of 4, we take duffel bags, and we put all our soft clothes in the front here. And family of 4, we can get it all in here. It works really well. There's a light in here that automatically turns on. I have the automatic switch turned off. There we are. Turn the light on. So, there's quite a bit of room there. It's where you check your brake fluid. And again, under the floor here is where you fill the isopropyl alcohol. Then there's also the oxygen ports right here. There's a Scott oxygen bottle in there. It's a big one. It goes across this whole back area here. And that's nice. So this has built-in oxygen, and that works really well. Don't use oxygen much, but if you do need to go up 14,000, 15,000 feet, it's nice to have. Or at night when you're above 9,000 or 10,000. Nice to have oxygen. So again, those latches are really nice on the 79 and newer, or I think 73 and newer. A few other things with the newer B55s. It has multiple fuel cells, but they're all interconnected, and they run to one fuel valve for each side. So the fuel valves are either on, off, or cross feed. You don't have to worry about burning out aux tanks first and then burn the mains. You just turn the fuel on and go. If you want to draw from the other tank, you go to crossfeed. Very simple, very dirt simple operation. In the later B55s, and some of the earlier ones too, we have this full-size baggage door. And this is kind of a big deal to me. A big deal for two reasons. If you have kids, they can get in the rear seat, which I took one seat out, as you'll notice, there's one missing, and I keep one folded up. It's just usually four of us. Once in a while we'll pick up a passenger, I'll throw them in the seat back here. But kids can load in through this rear if you want to, be in the bigger seat, and it's also easy to get baggage in and out of here, and then also into the extended baggage into the rear. So the big door is a big deal. Almost all the newer ones have it. Not all of them, though. I saw an 82 Bonanza once that had the small door, 82 V-tail. So that was interesting. But that's a nice feature. The cross feeds are nice. In the later models, too, they have a little more modern-looking instrumentation in them. Other than that, all the Barons are about the same. The B55 is just a great little airplane. So, again, the big deal on these, in my opinion, and people with the ones with the 470s in them would argue, but these 520s are just so hard to beat. Just the extra power you get, it really does make a difference in the way the airplane flies. Okay, coming inside the airplane. Not too bad interior. Interior's late 90s leather, pretty good shape. Thought about maybe redoing it, leaving it the way it is, because the headliner and everything's excellent. The window inserts are new, the interior is very nice. But I thought about maybe taking the bottom of the seats and redoing them in just a sheepskin cover just in the bottoms, a sewn in, really nice sewn in cover. I thought that would look really nice and just add a little bit of comfort. But I wasn't sure about these G&D inserts at first, but after flying the airplane, I think it might actually reduce the noise a little bit also. So that's kind of nice. But hopping in the pilot side, and this is more for the benefit of people who don't know about a B55. The master's over here on the left. I like the way they laid out the airplane. All your power and your engine instruments are on the very left side. Mags are on the left for the excuse me, for the left and right engines, left to right. So, and then your master, and then your alternators. So I like that all over there. Outside air temperature gauge, that's all nice. We got the radio master here, and the PFD for the Aspen here. That's the King KFC 200 autopilot. The switches, I liked my Duke a lot better for the placement of the switches. They were laid out a little better. Here they got the lights grouped together, and the fuel, and the anti-ice, but it just isn't laid out as nice, especially with this crossbar. That's my biggest complaint with any of the Barons. This yoke with the center yoke with the, I forget what you call it, the arm that comes out across here. I just don't care for this. It's in the way a lot. Your landing gear switch is hidden. Your flap switch is hidden. I really don't care for that. I liked my Duke much better for the way it was laid out. But it does work. It is simple. I suppose it was great back then. I just don't care for it now. I have an electric AI backup here. Then, of course, we have the Aspen here. And then I have a standard King, what is that, a KI-206, I can't remember, that runs off the KX-165. So that's kind of nice having a backup that's independent of the Aspen. I can shoot an ILS if I need to, or a localizer even if the Aspen goes away. So I really like having that mechanical backup. One thing I do like about the older Barons versus the new, and some people may not, I like the throttles in the middle. If you notice, the throttles are in the middle. The props are to the left and mixtures are to the right. On a newer Baron and most new airplanes, the throttles will be on your left, and the props will be in the middle. One thing I like about it is, and this is why I wouldn't want to switch to an electronic gauge, the props sit right in front of the RPM gauge. The throttles sit right in front of the manifold pressure gauge. The mixtures sit right in front of the digital fuel flow gauge. It's all self-evident what you need to be doing. You reach, make the adjustment, and look, it's very, very intuitive of me, this setup. I think it's one of the better things they did. I like having the throttle quadrant there. I just think it works really well. So, really like the Aspen. Gives you GPSS roll steering, gives you an air data computer. It's just, it's hard to beat the Aspen for the money. A G600 is a better system, there's no doubt, but it's 2.5 to 3 times the cost. So for me, it's pretty hard to beat the Aspen. I really like the GPI 762 from a standpoint of simplicity. It works well, easy data download. It's pretty bulletproof. It's hard to beat the JPI. Their customer service, that's another thing, but the unit itself is really good. I got a 530W. I'm going to be installing Voice Flight, which I really like. I think it's one of the neatest products that have come out for the money. For basically about $1,500–1,600 installed. I'll be able to add another push to talk to my yoke here and be able to tell my GPS where I want to go. Great idea. Works wonderful. Other than that, I just have a simple Garmin, I think that's the GMA 340. It works. Audio panels, to me, there's a lot of talk about audio panels. The 340s always worked well for me. I don't get into the, I'm sure I've had the PM Engineer, I think it's the PS Engineering 8000. It was fine too. I couldn't tell the difference between the two. Some people love the PS Engineering. I don't know. This works great. But I like the stack. It's very simple. 340, the 530W, soon to have Voice Flight, and the KX165. And this is, in my opinion, a really good digital radio or radar too. I think it's the Bendix. Don't hold me to this. I think it's the RD81, but it's a very good color radar. It works great. The KN64 DME. I'll turn it on for grins once in a while, but don't use it much. KT76A transponder. I'd rather have a 330 Garmin just because I like the simple input, but the KT76A is a pretty good old transponder. It works perfect until it breaks. No reason to use it or to replace it. We have the standard gauges over here that work well, the analog gauges, Beechcraft. I don't really like the placement way over here to the right, but they work. Of course, then we have the standard EGTs that have to stay in because they are primary, the JPI secondary, and then your instrument air pressure gauge and alcohol gauge. Kind of nice to have that gauge. It works well. Have music input. I can select DME off the Aspen or the 165. Then I have music select. I can either go external or from my Era 510, which I'll show next, and external plugs in there if I want to. So here we got the Era 510. I've had about every Garmin portable there is. I prefer the 796 for its size and its ability. I prefer size of display, but I prefer this because it fits in the cockpit so well, and it's right here off my arm, off the center armrest here. I can just touch this. It's not in the way. It's just very compact and easy to use. If I had more room, I'd rather have a 796. Believe it or not, I prefer this over an iPad or an Android. I have Garmin Pilot. I like it, but the Garmin handheld products are superior to all of them. They're just, the handhelds are just, sometimes they crash. I had the iPad and the Android both, and they can crash once in a while. The maps aren't as good. I like the standard Garmin map versus the overlaid government charts. It's just me, just preference. So, again, you may like something different. Down here on the left-hand side, we have a pressure gauge for the oxygen, showing 1500 psi, and then we have a de-ice pressure gauge, and that usually runs at about 8 psi, and then when you blow the boots, it'll run to about 15. So, works pretty good. The oxygen plug-in for the Pilot is right down there also. And all 6 places have an oxygen port to plug into. The seats are very comfortable in the B55. Center armrests fold down in the front and rear. The rear seats will lay all the way back, which is very nice. And they have oxygen ports along with cigarette lighter to plug in. Something also, anyone using a cigarette lighter power adapter, even the 24-volt ones, be very careful. I had radio problems the other day, static all the time, couldn't figure it out. My Garmin 530 was constantly receiving, and it was receiving static, not transmitting well. Well, I traced it down. One day I unplugged I had a power converter plugged in down here, a power adapter. So as I unplugged it, static went away. Plugged it in, static started. Well, come to find out, a friend of mine who's an electronic genius told me they used some, whatever circuitry they used to step down the voltage from 24 volts to 5 volts, creates a huge amount of RF. So, took it out, guess what, works great. So, kind of nice there. Oh, one other thing, I do have WX10A, which is nice backup between the WX10, or not backup, it's great. Actually, I use it more to find turbulence. It's really good at finding turbulence. So we got the WX-10A, works great. The digital radar's great for penetrating or going around the thunderstorm's property. I hate to use the term penetrating because you should never go through a thunderstorm. But it's great for the close-up work with thunderstorms. And the Era is great for planning around it. And you know, when you're 150, 200 miles out, to get an idea where you're going to go through. So between the three, it's about as capable as you can get. And again, you know, it leads me back to the seats. The 55, some people don't like the 55. I'm going to shut the master off here. Some people don't like the 55 because they say, well, I want the club seating. Well, the club seating's great. If you have 4 people or less, the club seating's wonderful. And that's because these seats sit backwards in the club seating of a 58. The problem with that is they're on the same spar. So what happens is they face backwards, so their back is to this seat back. So if you want any leg room in the rear whatsoever, you got to move these seats aft, which gets into the feet of the rear seat people, and then diminishes your baggage to rear seat baggage only. So the 58, in my opinion, just like the 55, is a 4-seat airplane. I had my 58 when I owned it. I turned the seats forward and liked them better. The reason to own a 58, in my opinion, is very straightforward. If you have people that can't get in the rear seat, if they're older, they don't have to climb up this wing, or really young kids, it's easier to load them in the barn doors, or you want to carry something big and bulky, the 58 makes sense. If you want the best airplane, dollar for dollar, the most efficient, the fastest, and it's 4 people or less, the 55 makes sense if you don't mind climbing on the wing. So that's my opinion there, the analysis between the two. I've owned a 58, a 58P, and 4 B55s, and the 58P was faster, but the 55s are 5 to 10 knots faster. They handle much better. The short nose 55s just really handle well, and they climb better single engine performance. They're just the barn doors. If you got to have them, that's the reason to buy the 58. And so, other than that, I don't know what else. Oh yeah, on this fuel selectors again. Those are kind of hard to see, but again, they're either on, off, or cross-feed. There is no auxiliary tank, so that's kind of nice. That really is a nice feature. Also, in the newer models, they have manual cowl flaps, which I know that may sound worse. Why would you want manual? Well, you want manual because those little electric motors are about $1,000 each in the other Barons, and most people just tend to opt to convert them to manual anyway. So here you get manual cowl flaps, which is nice. So can't say enough about the B55. It's my favorite light twin, normally aspirated light twin. My favorite single is a 67 through 69 V-tail 35. Again, really the V-tail compares a lot to this plane in efficiency. This plane will generally do, when we have 4 people in it in full fuel, on an average day, it's just around 190 knots on about 23.5 gallons an hour. You know, the little V-tail I have is an honest airplane with 4 people in it, 167 to 70 knots on 12 gallons an hour. So pretty hard to beat the efficiency of either of them. They both handle a lot alike. This a little heavier on the controls than the V-tail, but there is a big difference between how this handles and a 58 or a 58P especially. It's just very light on the controls. Very fun airplane to fly. And the great thing about Barons too, people make a big deal, oh, twins are hard to fly. I don't get it. This airplane is one of the easiest twins to fly I've ever flown. My Duke was the same way. The Duke was a little heavier. Things happen a little quicker. But any of the Beechcrafts, all the way up to the Duke, are just easy flying airplanes. I don't get the bad reputation that these planes get. I think people just get over their heads. Maybe they think they're better than they are, but it really takes very minimal time in the airplane. Once you get used to the pitch sensitivity, and that's one thing I found about the Beechcrafts in general, especially the V35, very pitch sensitive. You can start downhill 2,000 foot a minute very quickly, and I think that's where people get in trouble. They just let the plane get away from them. And the Baron's no different. My biggest gripes on the B55, again, would be the switch placement for the gear and the flaps. Hard to reach. Just don't care for it. My other gripe on this airplane particularly is the gear speed and the flap speed. In the Duke, it was 174 knots, I believe. This plane, it's 153. And for me to get down to 153 knots in this airplane, you about got to be pattern altitude 4 miles before the airport and down to 15 inches to get there. Many times I like to come into the pattern as fast as I can come in. It's just the way I like to fly. And a lot of times I'll find myself have to go to pattern altitude or a little below and then pitch up 300 or 400 foot to get it slowed down, to get the gear down. Once the gear's down, it's great. You come down at, usually on the shoot an ILS or a GPS approach, I'll come in at about 160 to 70 indicated, hit the initial fix at 155, 160, have the power back to 15. When I get to the final approach fix, I'm usually pretty close to gear speed. By the time I get to the final approach fix, I'm a 145, throw the gear down, and that'll bring me down to about 130, and about down the glide slope, usually about 500-600 foot a minute at that. So very easy plane to fly. I can't think of anything easier to fly than a Baron. I can't think of a higher quality airplane than a Baron. It's just such a solid airplane to anything else you can fly. One other plug for anyone listening to this video this long, C&D makes a wonderful heater replacement for the Baron, and they can make your regular heater work too. This one's got a great heater. I actually have to turn it down in flight, it gets too hot, but most air conditioning systems, for you that live in southern states or fly a lot there, they mount them in the tail, very intricate, or they run off the engines. C&D's got a new unit that mounts underneath here. It's all going to be self-contained underneath. It runs your heat and your air conditioning. The air conditioner is 100% electric. The heat, of course, runs off the gasoline still. But the nice thing is it's all self-contained. It's very minimal weight. And it has an electronic controller. You just set the temperature and forget it. It'll run the heat or the air as necessary. And again, it's Bill Sandman, the C&D in Michigan there. He's the best. There's no one better in the heating as far as I'm concerned. He really did well on my 58, showed me what to look for. And if I end up keeping this airplane a long time, I will rip this system out and have them put that system in. I believe it's called Nexus, Nexus. Wonderful system. So other than that, there's really nothing to do with this plane. I suppose I could go crazy in the panel and do a G600 and dual 750s, all that, but it's just hard to justify. It's just so capable as it is. Never thought I could own something like this. So anyway, that's a little bit about the B55 and especially the Colemill conversion and just general characteristics. Hope you enjoyed it.